Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar, Voice, Communication, and Parkinson's. I'm Donna Greening, Parkinson Canada's Education and Program Innovation Coordinator. From coast to coast, Parkinson Canada acknowledges the ancestral and unceded territories of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples. To access closed captioning, click on the CC Captions button and then click on Show Subtitle. We are grateful for the expert speakers who join us to share their knowledge during our webinars. If you have questions about today's topic after the conclusion of this webinar, please contact your healthcare provider or Parkinson Canada's information and referral team. Please submit any questions you have for our presenters by typing them into the Q&A tab found at the bottom of your webinar window. This will help us to monitor them more effectively. Please avoid using the chat window to submit your questions, but feel free to use that chat window to say hello or talk amongst yourselves. When the webinar ends, please take a moment to fill out our very short survey, which we use to evaluate our programming, ensuring that we're delivering content that's relevant to the Parkinson's community. Now, let's meet our first guest. Irene Doyle is a retired ambulatory care dietitian who worked at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Prince Edward Island. Born and raised in PEI, Irene obtained her Bachelor of Science at the University of Prince Edward Island and her Master of Science in Nutrition from the University of Manitoba. Irene coordinates and facilitates the PEI Parkinson Association support group and is active in the province's Parkinson's community. She is a member of St. Dunstan Basilica's choir in Charlottetown and serves as the choir's librarian. Irene is also active in PEI's social justice community and is a member of Cooper Institute and the Latin American Mission Program, which is an initiative of the Diocese of Charlottetown. Irene participates in virtual speech therapy sessions and her local choir as a means to prevent the onset of Parkinson's-related voice and speech challenges. Welcome, Irene.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I just have a cat that just decided to say hello. Approaching retirement, the one thing I never expected was the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. All my professional life, I worked as a dietitian using nutrition as a prevention of illness and living a healthy life. My plans for retirement included assisting those who are single again to learn how to plan and execute a healthy meal. All those dreams came to a speeding stop. I had to adjust. Little did I know that this disease would expand my world. My initial presentation was a tremor in my right hand and dragging of my right foot. The problem with my foot coincided with the twisted ankle that occurred at work, so it was easy to dismiss that issue. My family doctor was wonderful. She ordered a series of blood tests and a CAT scan. The morning of the CT scan, the technician indicated that she saw something that she had to discuss with the radiologist. Waiting for her to come back, I decided it must be a brain tumor. And if it was, I could deal with it. When the radiologist said it was only a shadow, what a great relief, it was not a brain tumor. My decision was I could deal with whatever it was. The day I received the diagnosis, I was shocked. Having had many clients with Parkinson's disease, I never thought I would have it. That week I pondered and I had to make a decision. So in June in 2010, my choices were I could do nothing and ignore everything and carry on, or I could accept this gift just as Michael J. Fox did and learn all about it and figure out how I was going to live my life as a healthy person. My first goal was not to get any worse. Knowing that exercise was very important, and I was already a member of the Atlantic Fitness Center, I engaged a trainer to help me to walk and exercise better. At this point, I was also introduced to webinars. This became a part of my world. The more I participated in webinars on Parkinson's disease, it brought me to the understanding that over 90% of people with Parkinson's disease have problems with their voice. And as a singer and a communicator, I did not want to develop voice or swallowing problems. As a dietitian, I was well aware of all these issues, and the swallowing issues especially, and all the difficulties that could come with that. My choir at St. Dunstan's Basilica is under the direction of Leo Marchildon, who is a composer and a fabulous teacher. We practice breathing and warm-up techniques prior to singing. We have learned how to project voice without shouting. By singing on vowels and breathing deeply, we can project our voices better. We also learn to listen to each other and to listen to our own voice as well. Just about everyone in our group has a smartphone, so we are encouraged to record and to practice at home. Plus, we rehearse 1.5 hours every Thursday and 30 minutes before service on Sundays. Although I belong to a choir, not everyone will have that opportunity to exercise their voice in singing. At my choir, I met a neurological music therapist who was substituting for our director. That day, I asked her if she thought music therapy would help people living with Parkinson's disease strengthen their voice. Her response was positive. She agreed to meet with our support group. Together, we developed a plan for the group. So in November 2015, Treble Tremors was born. It's a weekly singing group. We met in person. We had 2 groups, one in Charlottetown and one in Summerside. This continued until the pandemic and the shutdown. Through the magic of Zoom, we continued our weekly sessions. Today, we are continuing to meet by Zoom, which means that we are all on mute. This is very convenient because we meet at home. We don't have to deal with inclement weather, such as snow, freezing rain, stiffness, or anything else that comes up. From the beginning, I insisted that it be weekly because I know Parkinson's disease never takes a vacation. We never know what the next day brings. Our music therapist agreed so that when she's on vacation, she has a replacement music therapist meet with us. Treble Tremors is not just about singing and exercising our voice and swallowing muscles. It's also developed into a real support group. It doesn't matter if you can sing or like to sing, you can exercise the muscles for speaking and swallowing. It provides a community to meet and is valuable to all, but especially for those who have little social support. They have a community in which we can communicate. In many ways, I think of Parkinson's disease as a swallow your pride disease. By that, I mean that sometimes in crowds or just walking, I freeze and I can't move. I have to ask someone if they mind walking beside me. All I need is to touch the person and I can move. For instance, one Sunday morning when I was leaving the church, I thought the steps looked slippery. So I asked a young boy if he would walk beside me. All I needed for him to do was to walk beside me and I would put my hand on his shoulder as we went down the steps. He agreed. When we reached the sidewalk, he said to me, "This is weird." And my response to him was to say, "No, you did a wonderful job. You prevented me from falling." Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see an unfamiliar person. The facial masking has begun. Over time, the muscles in my face have stopped doing their job. I tried chewing gum and exercising my face by exaggerating the word "wow." But it progressed anyway. I know I'm smiling, but it doesn't always show on my face. My sister reminded me that smiling comes from the heart. I discovered Sarah Awde and Get Loud, Stay Loud. I communicated with Sarah and joined immediately. I'm learning so much about where sounds are formed in the mouth and the important role of the tongue. This daily program is varied and it is at the same time in all time zones. On Sunday, it's expressions. Monday is Mindful Monday with an occupational therapist who is skilled in mindfulness. She also does a session on cultivating cognition on Fridays. Both of these last about 30 minutes, but most of the other sessions are 15 to 20 minutes in length. One session called Get Loud, Stay Loud is a session where Sarah has us articulating words and increasing the length of time we can hold a note. Each day is different. Of particular interest to me is a professional singer, Kirsten Canister, who has a 30-minute session on speaking and singing in rhythm without using somewhat familiar tunes. There's also a speech language pathologist who is an actor. Using techniques from her acting career, she encourages us to reject our voice. Another is breathworks, voice exercise emphasizing the importance of breath and the tongue. We are guided through this voice-eccentric exercise class. with activities to help strengthen and maintain breathing and speaking muscles. This daily program is wonderful because it is guided. We are guided through the session, and if you miss the actual time, you can always get it on replay. With this program, you meet others, and it's interesting to see another person's progress. Often the therapist will mention that someone is clear and has learned to slow down and articulate better. As I participate in Get Loud, Stay Loud, it has become clear to me that Get Loud, Stay Loud has the same goals as my choir. Get Loud, Stay Loud emphasizes a strong voice, clarity, and volume. These are the same goals our director promotes. I find that the whole program, which includes mindfulness, helps with articulation, memory, and living in the present. The overall program has helped me to continue to have a clear voice, and this continues because I exercise it every day. The Get Loud, Stay Loud program has broadened my world. At the classes, we have gotten to know one another. Parkinson's disease does not discriminate. In our group, we have people from all walks of life. Participants are from Canada, United States, United Kingdom, Middle East, Africa, to name a few countries. Probably the most important thing is that we are not alone. It may feel like that at the time of diagnosis, but it's shown that if we participate with others, we'll have a better quality of life. I find it really enjoyable to communicate with people around the world. Over to you, Donna.
Thank you so much, Irene, for sharing that very moving story. I absolutely love how you have such a proactive approach to keeping some of those symptoms at bay, and how that Parkinson's choir that you're part of also serves as a community of support. Thank you so much. We're now going to welcome Sarah Awde. Sarah is an Ontario registered speech language pathologist with 20 years of experience working with adults with every manner of communication and swallowing impairment. She now works exclusively with individuals living with Parkinson's disease to help optimize communication and swallowing function. Sarah is the founder of Get Loud, Stay Loud, a Parkinson's-specific speech and voice exercise program with daily tune-in and follow-along classes. Members can attend live or do the on-demand classes at their convenience. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Donna. And thank you, Irene. You moved me to tears. Very beautiful. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here for my presentation. Okay. And move myself out of the way here. Okay. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for having me here. I am honored again to be speaking to the Parkinson Canada community. And I know we have people logging in from all over the world. So wherever you are from, welcome. And I really hope that you get a lot out of the next 30 minutes. There's so much information to share, but I really tried to condense the core information resources. I've also shared a pretty extensive resource page with Donna, who will be sharing that after, with all the links to the programs, apps, software that I speak about, and maybe even some that we didn't have time to fit into the presentation, but you may find helpful. So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about what are the common speech and voice issues in Parkinson's and why do they occur. We're going to discuss the direct and the indirect therapeutic programs available specifically for Parkinson's. We're going to talk about the Parkinson's-specific apps and assistive devices that you may find interesting. We're going to briefly talk about respiratory muscle strength training devices, as they really are an emerging tool with lots of evidence behind it to support those with Parkinson's to improve their breathing, their voice, as well as their swallowing. And then at the end, we'll have a question period. Okay, so why is the speech pathologist involved with individuals with Parkinson's? And you may already know this, but speech pathologists kind of have a two-tiered involvement with adults, especially with Parkinson's. So we manage both the communication and the swallowing issues that can arise with many neurological conditions. but Parkinson's is certainly one of them. Communication can have anything to do with your voice, so the production, the sound that comes out. Speech, that's how voice is articulated, how clear it sounds. Language, which is word retrieval, and cognition we know is attention, memory, focus, all of those higher level executive functions. And as well with Parkinson's in particular, we work with managing facial masking. What can we do to minimize the effects? And how do we make ourselves more expressive in the presence of facial masking? And secondly, our role is in treating, assessing, managing, and rehabilitating swallowing function. So that's anywhere from the management of your saliva to chewing, preparing, and swallowing food. And of course, number one is minimizing the risk of aspiration. And aspiration is when food, liquid, medication, saliva goes down the wrong way into the airway instead of into the stomach where it should go. So we know that Parkinson's disease is a paucity of dopamine in an area of the brain called the basal ganglia. And some of the motor symptoms that are most common, which you may be very familiar with, are tremor, stiffness or rigidity in the muscles, slower movements, difficulty getting movements going. And Irene spoke about freezing, which can happen both in the body as well as with the speech. There can actually be speech freezing that occurs. And the most sort of all-encompassing symptom that I think of is smaller movements. And someone once described to me Parkinson's being the disease of low amplitude. It wants to make every system in the body smaller. And if you think about it, that's very true. From the length of your step to your arm swing, to the size of your voice, to the size of the muscles of articulation, your speech muscles, it really does make all of our movements smaller. So it makes sense that a lot of the treatments and the exercises and the programs that are Parkinson's specific, they all involve making everything bigger. So if you've heard of LSVT loud or LSVT big, it's all about making all of the systems in the body more exaggerated, more amplified. So specifically, some of the communication changes that can happen in Parkinson's are difficulties with speech. So maybe mumbled or less articulated, less clear speech. There can be difficulty with the fluency or the pacing of your speech. And some people have more of a slow, laborious, effortful speech pattern. And then some people have the opposite problem where speech is festinating. And festinating speech is fast, rapid, cluttered, uncontrolled bursts of speech. The number one complaint that we get as speech pathologists is lack of voice volume. So people coming and saying, you know, I used to have a really strong, robust voice. Now my voice, I can't project. People are asking me to repeat myself. Even the quality of the voice can change. So there can be hoarseness, harshness, breathy quality to the voice. As we mentioned previously, there can be difficulty initiating speech. So there can be elements of speech freezing. And of course, one of the hallmarks of Parkinson's is that reduced facial expression, referred to as facial masking. So why does this occur? Why are all of these communication issues happening in Parkinson's? And it all stems back to the lack of dopamine in the basal ganglia, causing a faulty feedback loop. Okay, so your brain with Parkinson's starts to give you false information. It starts to tell you that your voice is nice and loud when perhaps it wasn't. It starts to tell you that your speech is nice and clear and understandable when perhaps it was more mumbled and not very clear. The same thing happens with the length of your stride and your arm swing. So this faulty feedback loop results in your brain thinking that you're still making big movements and big voice. So you don't do anything to correct it. You don't increase the effort. You don't say, oh, that didn't come out loud enough, so I need to increase the effort and project my voice. So that's often what happens with Parkinson's, is that it's often the caregiver, the friends, the family saying, your voice, your speech has really gotten quiet and more mumbled. And often the person with Parkinson's says, I think I'm speaking quite clearly. I think you have a hearing impairment. And if anyone can relate to that, this happens quite often. Speech pathologists send the spouse just as a backup or a caregiver for a hearing test. Turns out their hearing is fine, and it is in fact the Parkinson's that's resulting in that lack of awareness of the speech and the voice becoming smaller. So it's really important to understand why the communication issues are happening so that you can really get behind the treatments and the exercises that are Parkinson's specific. So one golden rule that you can remember when it comes to Parkinson's, if your voice feels slightly too loud, you're likely at the right level of loudness. Because if we go back, if we think our voice is coming out at a normal level, but it's really coming out more in the soft to very soft, we have to kind of overshoot, okay, and come out a little bit louder in order to come back to what will be perceived as a more normal loudness level. So what are some of the treatments that we can do for our voice and our speech? Well, there are two direct treatments that are evidence-based, and they've been around. LSVT has been around the longest, if you've heard of LSVT loud. And the focus of LSVT loud is to think loud. And this treatment is very intense. It's typically 1 month, 4 times a week, 1 hour sessions 4 times a week. And on the days that you have therapy, direct therapy, there's a little bit of homework. And on the days that you don't have direct therapy, there's even more homework. So it is a very intense program, and you'd have to check with your province. I'm fairly certain that still in Ontario, at least under OHIP, this is not covered. It's either pay out of pocket or it's could be covered by extended health benefits. But as to specific provinces, you'd have to check. I know in the States, for anyone tuning into the States, it is often covered, at least partially covered. The second direct therapy program is called the Speak Out program. And this was developed by Parkinson Voice Project out of Texas. It as well is a 1 month program, direct therapy, a little bit less intense, 2 to 3 times per week, 45-minute sessions. The key to both of these exercise or direct therapy programs is that after you're done your intense month, you have to continue daily with the exercises. So about 15 minutes of exercises in order to maintain the gains that you've achieved during that direct therapy. So this is what led me to develop the Get Loud, Stay Loud program, the one that Irene mentioned in the beginning. So Get Loud, Stay Loud is not direct therapy. It's tune in and follow along voice and speech exercise classes that are 100% online. There's a variety of different classes, and you simply tune in, follow along to the therapist, and get your exercises done with a professional. So again, not direct therapy. It's a daily tune in and follow along speech and voice fitness program. Some people seek out a speech pathologist that maybe don't do these direct programs like LSVT Loud or Speak Out. They might piece together more of an individualized program, drawing on their own experience, maybe pulling concepts from different direct therapy approaches. And that's certainly a very good approach as well. So really your access to this is going to depend on how much coverage you have, what's geographically and financially accessible to you. Okay, so the importance of starting as early as possible cannot be understated. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So the earlier you can start doing Parkinson-specific voice and speech exercises, the more you're going to be able to slow the progression of all of the issues that could happen. And it is much easier to start at a pretty good level of voice and speech and just slow the decline than to wait until you're at a point where there's severe voice, severe speech, or severe swallowing impairment, and then have to make the gains back. So the best time to start is now, if you haven't already. But ideally, you do want to start as early as possible, if possible, at the moment of diagnosis, to really prevent or slow, I should say, slow the decline. There's no way we can 100% prevent, but we can certainly slow the decline of these issues. And Irene is a real shining example of everything she does to be proactive in maintaining her voice, her speech, her swallowing, her facial movement, all of those things. So what are these core exercises that you would see in any of these programs? I like to refer to them as the bread and butter exercises, or another therapist that I know refers to them as the broccoli and the Brussels sprouts. They may not be the most exciting, but they are the most important. And if you do any kind of Parkinson's specific program or therapy, these will be very familiar to you. So the first one is a sustained vowel phonation. And that's just a fancy term for doing an at a midline voice, not too high, not too low, or another vowel. We typically use because it's a nice, open, relaxed vowel sound. So doing an and holding it for as long as you can with good voice quality, maybe even 10, 15 seconds, and then doing that repeatedly. So 8 to 10 of those. The next exercise is taking that good strong but now you're going to glide it in a pitch glide. So you're going to start low and you're going to glide it up. So Zoom might mute me here, but I'll give you an example. Ah. So what we're doing here, we're not trying to become better singers. We're trying to exercise the laryngeal muscles and the laryngeal structure. So the larynx, when you swallow, has to move up and a little bit forward to get the airway out of the way of the food so that it doesn't go down the wrong way. And when we do a pitch glide up and down, your larynx does that movement. When you go up in pitch, the laryngeal structure lifts and certain things tighten in the throat. And then when you lower, it goes back down. So you're able to exercise that system by doing pitch glides. Okay, and there's lots of different styles of pitch glides, lots of ways you can change it up. But the key is you want to maintain that laryngeal movement, not just for swallowing function, but also to maintain good intonation in the voice. Parkinson's also wants to make your voice more flat and robotic and not have a lot of intonation. Again, low amplitude. It wants to make everything smaller. So pitch exercises also help us to maintain that up and down melody in the voice that adds interest and personality to what we're saying. The really good news about doing these exercises is that when you do Parkinson-specific voice and speech exercises, you're working on both the communication and swallowing function. Because again, it's the same muscles and systems involved, which is why speech pathologists manage both the communication and the swallowing piece. So the louder, the better. Should we just all scream in our car or in the shower? No. It is possible to strain and harm the vocal cords. So you don't want to be too loud. You don't want to be yelling, straining. The vocal cords are very delicate tissues. If anyone's ever been to a concert and spoke really loudly for an hour or two, and then you had a hoarse voice the next day, you've done some very temporary damage to those vocal cords. So in physical fitness, we used to say, no pain, no gain. This does not apply to vocal fitness. You want to stay hydrated. You want to power from a good diaphragmatic breath to fill the tank. And you want to project with intent or be a little louder than feels necessary. So that's my little sign that I made. It's not no pain, no gain. It's no pain, no strain, only healthy gains. So a suggested home voice exercise routine for anybody here is to do the following: 8 to 10 of those loud, long ahs. So not too high, not too low, right in the middle. Ah. Try holding for 5 seconds. Then see if you can hold for 6, and then 7. Try to get up to 10 or 15. And you would do 8 to 10 of those. 8 to 10 pitch glides high, going low to high, and then 8 to 10 pitch glides going high to low. Then if you have a couple of minutes, take anything, a magazine, a book, the Bible, whatever you want to use, read aloud with a well-projected, exaggerated, animated voice for 3 to 5 minutes. That is a really good home program that anybody can do. And if you're really short on time, people laugh at this, but it is the best. Do your voice exercises in the shower or the tub. You've got a warm, humidified air. You've got great acoustics. You're going to sound fantastic. And you're multitasking. You're getting something done, and you can make it part of those. When I do this, I do this. Just let everyone else in your household know that you're doing that so that you don't, people aren't wondering what you're doing in there. So next, I want to talk about an app that's available for people with Parkinson's. And this was created by a colleague and a dear friend who's very innovative. He's a speech pathologist out of Austin, Texas, named Stephen Darrow. And he created Loud and Clear. And you can download this for free on the App Store. And I believe there is a paid version that has more selection of exercises and maybe more stimulus materials. But I do know that the basic version is free. And it guides you through the core exercises, sentences, and it even has a little microphone on it that tells you whether you're in the right zone of loudness. So if that's something you want to try, it's certainly available if you have any kind of tablet or smart device. The next app that's fairly new, only a few years old, is something called scrolling therapy. So this is to target facial masking in Parkinson's. So scrolling therapy works by attaching to your social media accounts. And then what it does is, in order to scroll or like something or do whatever you need to do on social media, it makes you do a facial exercise first. For example, you scroll through, your neighbor had a new grandchild, you want to like this post, you have to do 3 big smiles, and the facial recognition software recognizes whether you got good movement in your face. If you do it successfully, it likes the post. So that's just an example of really combining things that we do anyway, social media scrolling, all of that, and getting some exercise done at the same time. So that app is available. I believe it's free as well. It was last time I checked, and it is called Scrolling Therapy. So the next one I'll only mention briefly because it's currently not available in Canada, but I do know they are working on regulatory approval, and it is available in the States, I believe also in Australia and New Zealand. So Speech Vive, it's a wearable speech aid that goes in one of your ears, kind of like a hearing aid, like an external hearing aid. So every time you go to speak, it senses that, and it automatically triggers a babbling speech noise in that ear. Okay. And it really relies on the Lombard effect. The Lombard effect is our tendency to speak louder and clearer when we're in amongst background noise. So every time you go to speak, it plays this sound and your brain is triggered to speak a little louder and also more clearly. So even though it's not available in Canada, I did reach out to the Speech Vive people, and they said if you go on their site, speechvive.com, you can join their mailing list and you can keep updated on when it could be approved in Canada. If you are from the States, I believe it is covered under Medicare. Okay. Lastly, as far as devices, if you're going to be in a situation where you know that your voice is just not going to sustain itself loud enough or long enough. Let's say you have a presentation to do in a large room and you just don't think you're going to have the vocal projection despite doing your exercises, or maybe you're feeling under the weather and you don't want to strain your voice. There are voice amplifiers that will do that for you. And there are lots of different styles, kinds, brands, price points. If you go on Amazon or Best Buy, any of those electronic stores will have these kinds of devices. You can read the reviews. I personally don't have one to recommend, but these are 2 that did come up on several speech therapy sites. And they can be a really good backup for situations where you know you need to be loud, but you just don't think your voice can manage it in that situation. So the other thing I want to talk about are respiratory muscle strength training devices. So you might hear these referred to as EMST devices or RMST devices. The research is really exciting on this. There is increasing research to support specifically other populations as well, but relevant to Parkinson's, that using these respiratory muscle strength training devices, you can increase your respiratory capacity, so your ability to breathe in and get a really good breath, your vocal projection, your breath support. The expiratory one can work on cough, which we know how important a good, strong, robust cough is to expel anything that goes down the wrong way. So you really want to make sure that as Parkinson's progresses, you aren't losing the strength of your cough. So certainly speak to your speech pathologist, your treating physician. You want to make sure that before you start on any of these devices, that you've been cleared, that there's no contraindications medically, and that you're using it appropriately, and that you're choosing the right device for you. For example, the two examples I've put here, the first one is called the breather. And this one is both an inspiratory and expiratory training device. So it works on the breathing in muscles as well as the breathing out muscles. Whereas the EMST 150 is only expiratory. So it only works on the exhalation. There's also a light version, I believe, of the EMST, if you're at a quite impaired level, where it doesn't take as much to trigger the device. So certainly, this is not an exhaustive list of these devices. And these are the two that I've heard most used with Parkinson's, but certainly check with your speech pathologist and your physician, your treating primary care physician, to see if this device could be helpful to you and how to use it appropriately. And just lastly, there are many other apps, programs, software, assistive devices, too many to name in such a short presentation, but I have tried to include as many as I can in that handout that I sent to Donna for the Parkinson communication resources. So I have listed many more in there. So please refer to that, and hopefully there are some things in there that can be helpful to you. So I will pass it back to Donna.
Thank you so much. That was a really great explanation of how doing some of the voice exercises can actually help with swallowing issues. And who knew that singing in the shower could actually be therapeutic? So who's going? We're going to launch right now into some questions that have been submitted by registrants. This one is for Sarah. Someone asked, once the voice is affected, can it return to normal with voice exercises?
So I think it's important to manage expectations whenever you start doing a voice exercise program. How much gain you're going to get back in your voice, your speech, and your swallowing is really going to depend on a number of factors. How late in the stage are you in Parkinson's? How severe are your voice or speech symptoms? Lifestyle factors. How much do you exercise? How often are you doing the voice exercises, and how diligently? And it's also important to remember that even as we age without Parkinson's, we can start to lose some voice robustness, and our voice changes. And that's simply called presbyphonia. So presby, if anyone's been to Presbyterian church, presby means old, and phonia means voice. So literally it means old voice. So as we age, we naturally incur our voice changes. Men typically go a little higher in pitch, and women tend to go a little lower in pitch. So it's important to keep that in mind when you have expectations, but certainly anyone, unless you're at a very severe stage where maybe you need an alternative communication device, anyone with Parkinson's should at least try an intense voice therapy first, and then really try to stay diligent with the exercises after.
Thank you. Here's another question that was submitted. What kinds of technology or programs or assistive devices are available for written language when the person has difficulty typing on a computer or keyboard, something like perhaps voice to text or something like that? And along with this, do you have any ideas for making actual handwriting easier too?
So the great thing is that most, even Microsoft, I believe now has built-in speech to text functions. Any smartphones now, if you want to do a speech to text, and there are also, in the resource list, I also listed some other apps that you can download, and of course, there's free and paid versions. But there are many, many devices that can do that function of speech to text. If you're just finding that the tremor is really hard, because I know a lot of people with tremor or rigidity or stiffness, they find it hard to type. There's also special keyboards that you can get where the keys are bigger or the keys are weighted so that they're maybe more adaptable to someone that might accidentally hit a key because of a tremor or a movement. So I did list a pretty extensive list of some augmentative devices or some software that can help with that. As far as writing, again, that tremor can be problematic. So sometimes a thicker, better gripping pen that has more of a fabric on it might be easier. A weighted pen can help with the tremor. There's also wrist weights that you can put on your dominant hand. And again, it can help to settle that tremor when you're writing. And I did list a few other suggestions in the resource handout as well to help with writing. That's helpful.
Here's a follow-up question to that. It's sort of related to what I just asked you, but someone said that their husband has lost the ability to speak and uses communication devices, but typing has also now become really difficult. Is there anything that he can use for communication?
So speech and typing are available.
Mm-hmm.
So there are special keyboards. There's actually one, I think it's called the Orbi Touch, that is a keyless keyboard and it has more dials, so it's easier to access. And I think I listed that in the list. Again, a touch screen might be more helpful than keys. So having a lot of laptops now have a touch screen option or an iPad or any kind of tablet device. So that might be easier. And then software that can make the options bigger so that he has, so, you know, it doesn't take as much precision to punch the button. But yeah, if there's something like that where they're looking for maybe a higher tech device, the best person to seek out is a speech pathologist that is certified and specializes in AAC. So AAC is alternative and augmentative communication. And that speech pathologist can show them the whole gamut of low tech, high tech devices that would be most applicable to their abilities.
Great, thank you.
Our music therapist suggested for respiratory muscle strengthening, we use a kazoo. A kazoo and also a recorder will help. So those are two cheap things, eh?
Absolutely. Or a balloon. In our breathworks class, our instructor often used simple things like a balloon to help increase respiratory strength.
Great. That's great suggestions. Irene, here's a question for you. What is your favorite or your most challenging song or vocal exercise to do? Or you can tell me about both.
Okay. Most challenging for me is the rhythm. Is with Kirsten. She always singing in rhythm, and that's not just with her program, but also in choir to be doing the rhythm for getting the rhythm of the message across. That's the most challenging. But I think the most enjoyable for me is learning new things. I absolutely love learning new songs and just challenging my voice to go a little higher or lower and all that kind of stuff. I just find it really very valuable to sing every day.
You know, I'm not surprised you said that, because when you were telling your story, you talked about how when you got the diagnosis, you decided that you were going to grab the bull by the horns. And I think that's really your personality, is to be proactive and take on that challenge. And it kind of makes you really stronger. I think that is totally you.
Thank you.
I would concur, knowing Irene.
Yeah. Sarah, someone has asked, how often do they need to practice?
So for voice exercise, ideally, in an ideal perfect world, do a little bit every day, but that's not always realistic. So if you can do 4 or 5 times a week, keeping in mind that this does not have to be an hour. This can be 5 minutes, 15 minutes. Our classes, as Irene said, we try to keep them 15, 20 minutes. Even just doing those bread and butter exercises, 8 loud, long ahs, 8 pitch glides high, 8 pitch glides low. And even if you can do that, and you can do that in 5 minutes, that even just that little bit, it's the consistency of doing it on a regular basis that really makes that difference, as Irene can attest to.
All right, here's another one. This is also for Sarah. Are there any foods that are known to have a negative impact on the volume of your voice?
So I'll speak more to voice hygiene. So we know that some people, at least anecdotally, say that dairy, high fat, greasy foods can increase mucus. So if you increase mucus in the throat, then obviously that can affect voice quality and voice volume. If you are dehydrated, so it's not food, but liquid, but if you are dehydrated, obviously you're not going to get that nice thin layer of mucus on the vocal cords, which helps the vocal cords to move and vibrate and creates the best sound and volume. Also, acidic or really high fat foods can increase reflux in the body, and reflux can actually come up and trickle over into the vocal cords. So you can imagine that those delicate little tissues don't do well with acid. So some people can experience voice issues from constant reflux going on top of their vocal cords. So I would say, just in general, the best things to combat that: stay systemically hydrated, stay on top of your fluids, what's appropriate for you. Limit caffeine and alcohol, as they can be dehydrating. And then be cautious with dairy, high fat, high acid foods.
That's great advice. Someone asked Sarah, it takes me longer to participate in open-ended conversations. Also, when a friend tells a long and detailed story, I lose track, get bored, and can't remember everything. And then my friend has to start over, making me impatient, and asking if you have any tips.
Yeah, so along with Parkinson's, we know that there can be some cognitive changes. I'm not talking about Lewy body components, but just in general with Parkinson's. And that can really affect our ability to pay attention when someone's speaking, pay attention when we're reading. I often get this complaint. I read the same paragraph over and over, and I just can't focus. So if this is happening in conversations, my advice would just to be really open and honest with the friend or the conversation partner, and just say, due to my Parkinson's, my concentration is less than it used to be. So, and then discuss some strategies that might work well on both sides, because it takes two to tango. You can implement strategies, and then that person can implement strategies. So maybe you can ask them, is it possible I want to hear your story. I'm really excited to hear it, but could you give me the main points ahead of time so that I can kind of have an idea, a template of what's coming? Really, maybe making a point to interject every once in a while politely and say, just catching up. This is what I understood. And then taking a moment to process. And the other person, if they're willing to use any of these strategies, they could maybe make their story a little shorter, maybe give key points, and then ask for, did you catch that? Did you understand that? Do you want me to go over that again? I think just open communication is the key to both people having a successful communication interaction.
Thank you. Here's a question for Irene. What is the most helpful thing that you've learned by participating in your choir or in Get Loud, Stay Loud?
I think the most important thing, I think, is not to be skipping rehearsals, and not to and to be sure that you practice voice exercises every day. That's the most important thing, and that goes for professional singers and for amateurs like me and so on. We have one professional singer in our choir, and she actually, it's interesting to listen to her. She practices before, if she's a cantor, she will practice a half hour before she even comes, just to make sure her voice is strong. And I think the program with the speech language pathologist, that is the actor, she talks about how people who act, they have to strengthen their voice, they have to be careful of their voice so that they can project to the back of the room. So I think that the question was, like, what's the most important thing? I think it's daily exercise. That's the most important thing. And Sarah said that maybe if you can't possibly do it, we eat every day. We eat every day. We get up in the morning. We brush our teeth or whatever. It's easy to do 5 minutes of exercise for your voice. When you think of if you lose your voice, you're separated from a lot of people. That's really important, I think.
That's very true. It's just establishing that new habit.
Yeah. That's right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing. And so it's simple. It's simple. I mean, you don't have to do anything fancy. You can sing happy birthday when you're brushing your teeth or that kind of thing. You can do anything at all. It doesn't matter, right? Do, re, mi, up and down the scale, whatever. It's just a matter of doing something. And I think if you have a mindset, like when I was diagnosed, I said, I wasn't going to get any worse. So how am I not going to get any worse? Well, I'm going to make sure that I do things that are positive. And one of the things that I used was I don't deal with negativity. Like I don't belong to any groups that are negative. I tend to socialize with people who are positive. All of that kind of stuff is a holistic kind of way of living. Mm-hmm. And it all comes back to, what are your values? Like, what are your values? Well, if your voice is a really, really strong value, then you're going to do things to make sure that you have a good, strong voice.
Yep, that's great advice for people, whether they have Parkinson's or not. Just to surround yourself with those people who have that same positive outlook that you do. So that's really great. Sarah, here's a question for you. Someone says, I've heard the expression to speak with intent. Is this the same modus operandi as Get Loud, Stay Loud? Both require the person with Parkinson's to take control of the speaking realm through the central nervous system rather than the autonomic nervous system, which requires dopamine.
Absolutely. So we actually have 2 speak out style classes within our program, but the speaking with intent, really, it is magical. It is tapping into the non-automatic system in the brain. Because when we normally speak, we don't often think about what we're saying. We tend to say things the same way, the same things without too much thought, kind of like driving home from work on autopilot. You're not even really consciously aware of what you're doing. And that that automatic system in the brain passes through basal ganglia, which is dopamine deficient. When you do anything with intent or purpose, whether you say, I will speak with intent, or I will be loud, clear, controlled, there's lots of different mantras you can use. You're now tapping into the non-automatic system in the brain, which is not at it doesn't have a dopamine deficiency. Now you can be louder and clearer and speak with more intent. So yes, we absolutely use that method in varying styles and ways in our Get Loud, Stay Loud program.
Great, thank you. I've had to put my glasses on so that I can read some of the Q&As from the Q&A tab. So someone has asked, when I have tremors, I am unable to speak. Then when the tremor is subsiding, I stutter. What exercise should I use for this?
I think it's important exercise is important, but I think also just modifying your environment to give you the best success is also equally important. For example, we know that with Parkinson medications, there's on periods and there's off periods. You work closely with your movement disorder specialist to really try to get the optimal dose and timing of the medication so that's off periods are reduced as much as possible. But if you know that there's a certain time of the day that you're typically better, there's less tremor in your voice, you have better, stronger voice, clearer speech, I would say adapt your environment to those good periods. Schedule your appointments, your important conversations, meetings, medical appointments, when you know that you're going to have those periods. And then when you know that, during this off period in the afternoon when I'm tired, haven't had my medication for several hours. Maybe that's just a time when you rest. It's not the time to be implementing exercises. Ideally, you want to do your voice and your speech exercises during your optimal times of the day. And for every person, that might be different depending on the type of whether you're a morning person, a night person, what time you take your medication. So I would say just optimize your environment, reduce background noise if you really do have to communicate something. Be upfront and say, I'm having a bad voice period. Could we chat about this later? I think that's maybe a strategy that would work better for that situation.
Okay. We've got several people who've asked pretty much the same question. They want to know roughly how many decibels should they be aiming for in their speech, and also if there's an app that they can use that can measure their decibels.
Yes. So as far as the apps, there are many, many free apps. If you just go to any app store and type in loudness meter or decibel level meter, sound level meter, there's many, many different options. And there's always a free version. And I always tell people, you don't have to pay for the fancy upgraded version for your purposes. If you're doing voice exercise and you want to measure how loud you're being or make sure that you're in the zone. So the loudness on a device is really going to depend on how far the device is away from your mouth. If I put the device in the other room, well, it's probably, I can scream and it's only going to pick up 50 decibels. Whereas if it's right close to my mouth, I really don't have to speak loudly. So typically we say when you're doing voice exercise and you want to measure it with a device, your loudness, you want to be about 1 foot to 1.5 feet away from your mouth. So basically if you were sitting at a desk and it was sitting on the desk in front of you. And then if you don't really have any significant voice issues and you probably can achieve 85 to 90 decibels, but for someone that's quite impaired, maybe their goal is 75. So I think every person is very individual depending on how severe the voice issue is. And if you really want to get a specific number, you're best to go see a speech pathologist who can evaluate your voice and then help you to set those goals accordingly.
Thank you. Okay, several people have also asked about mucus. They say they're drinking enough, but they still have dry mouth. What can they do to reduce the amount of mucus that they have?
So the mucus is a big issue in Parkinson's, and providing that all other issues have been ruled out, allergies, viral infection, if it is something that is related to Parkinson's, and I believe the research says that about 45% of individuals with Parkinson's struggle with, the runny nose or the mucus draining back into their throat. There's not a clear indicator as to why it happens based on the research. They do know that it has nothing to do with the severity of your Parkinson's. So if you have a severe late stage Parkinson's, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have more severe mucus or drainage issues. The best thing to do is once you've ruled out any other causes is to seek out your primary care physician who can hopefully rule out a medication side effect, make sure it's not a medication that's contributing or making it worse. And then is there anything that they can suggest medication spray wise? I know some suggest those saline rinses, the little neti pots that you put the saline in and then doing the nasal irrigation to help with those symptoms. But there isn't sort of a one-stop fix-all for that. And it is a very frustrating symptom for sure.
Thank you. I know a lot of people have asked about the list. Yes, it's going to be emailed out when we have the video up on YouTube, and we'll send everyone a recording link as well as the list that Sarah provided. So no worries about that. I got one more question, and that's for Irene. Someone asked, do you have any advice for someone who's never been in a choir before, and maybe they're kind of on the shy side, or they're not the greatest singer? What would you say to them?
Everybody can sing. And there's a group here in Charlottetown that are just a sing-along group. There's all kinds of different choirs around everywhere. There's female choirs, there's male choirs, there's professional choirs, church choirs. There's not a church in Canada that would ever turn anybody down to sing. I think if you're not a churchgoer, it's difficult to find a choir, but the Legion has choirs. Just about everybody has a choir. School choirs and so on. There's a choir here in PEI called the Teachers Choir, which are, some people are teachers, but some people are not teachers, but they sing every week. So I think the thing about it is just to find somebody that's in a choir and say, can I go along too? And I think that's important that you don't be discouraged. And if you stand beside somebody that's a really good singer, your voice will increase and you'll begin to learn. You'll learn a little bit better. You don't have to sing out all the time, but just to learn. I would really encourage everybody to sing in a choir, because it's not just the voice exercise, but it's the social support, and it's a different kind of socialization than anything else. I think it's fun. And like our choir director, he worked in LA for a long time. He worked with Walt Disney Foundation, I think, or something anyway. And so oftentimes we'll be singing, we'll be practicing a hymn or something. He'll say, my body lies over the ocean. And those kinds of things, like, it just kind of makes it really fun. So I think just try it out. Don't be scared. I don't think there's anybody in a choir that I would ever discourage anybody.
That's really great advice. Thanks so much, Irene. Well, that's all the time we have today for questions. And thanks to everyone for submitting such really great questions. Very special thank you to Sarah for such great information about speech and communication challenges that can occur with Parkinson's and strategies to help manage them, and to Irene Doyle for sharing her positive and proactive approach to keeping those symptoms at bay. Watch your email inboxes for our follow-up email that will include a link to a recording of this webinar and all of the resources and more that were mentioned today. Parkinson Canada is thrilled to share an exciting opportunity from Parkinson Canada aimed at supporting local health, wellness, and education initiatives for individuals living with Parkinson's and their care partners across Canada. The Parkinson Canada Care Fund is a grant program designed to address the unmet needs of people affected by Parkinson's in diverse and underserved communities. The goal of this initiative is to enhance the quality of life for those affected by Parkinson's by empowering them with comprehensive support, education, and wellness resources. Programs receive funding from the Care Fund. They must align with one of the following focus areas: exercise programming, education and skill building initiatives, and/or mental health programming. So for more information, you can email carefund@parkinson.ca. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar on sleep, rest, and Parkinson's, taking place on Monday, June 17th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Watch your email inboxes for more details and the registration link. When the webinar window closes, please take a moment to fill out our short survey. It helps us plan programming that's relevant to you. On behalf of all of us at Parkinson Canada, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See you in June.